Bernie Sanders will never be good enough. He likes to say he's a socialist, but he's not. He's a social democrat. He believes in a capitalist system with a large welfare state, much like Scandinavia. And the socialists, who actually believe that there should be no private trade, think Bernie is also a socialist, although I think a lot of socialists know he isn't. But anyway, I digress. The far left doesn't like Bernie Sanders, okay? A lot of people talked about the Bernie revolution and how he invigorated this progressive wave, but let's just be clear. The progressive wave, as we know it among the Democrats, has little to do with Bernie Sanders and is actually much further to the left of Bernie Sanders. And I know a lot of people like to go, no, Bernie's as far left as they go. Absolutely not. No way. He's certainly on the further left spectrum compared to Democrats. But on the actual far left spectrum, yeah, no. Check out this post. Azealia Banks calling out Bernie Sanders, saying, "We all must stand together to reject Trump's bigotry." That was Bernie Sanders. And Azealia responded, "Shut up, Bernie. The whole country is racist in essence. It's funny to watch all the rest of white people try to blame a singular Donald Trump for decades of a collective white supremacist history." My brain. Stop trying to absolve yourself of responsibility and point fingers at Trump. Liberal whites have spent decades doing nothing but talking. Why don't you get up off your ass and do something about your racist white brethren everywhere, instead of trying to dupe minorities into thinking a lone Donald Trump is responsible for the entirety of American tyranny? Donald Trump wasn't even alive when the USA was established under the same white supremacist ideals it exists under today. I'm mostly tired of white people like you trying to signal blame passing as virtue. Shut up, Bernie. Wow, was that cringe-inducing. But Bernie, you ain't good enough. You just ain't good enough for the far left, and you never will be. Well, here's the thing. Azealia Banks straight up deleted her comment because it's very controversial. Bernie Sanders has been protesting for civil rights for a long time. There's a famous photo of Bernie being dragged away by the cops back during the civil rights movement. Here's a guy who has spent his entire life fighting for equality and justice and all that stuff. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They don't like him. But the actual comment that he posted where she responded, he said, "Here is the simple truth. We have a president who is racist, a president who is a sexist, a president who is a homophobe, a president who is a xenophobe, and a president who is a religious bigot. We have got to confront that truth and reject Trump's bigotry." And even this, it's so funny how the chain works. Donald Trump, in my opinion, is not a racist. I do not believe he is a sexist or a homophobe or a xenophobe or a religious bigot. But I would say, with a caveat, I do think Trump may have said things perceived as racist. I think he's taken out of context. I believe he's a culturist in that he believes American culture is better, and he's a nationalist. I do not believe he is a sexist in the capacity that they think he is, but I do think Trump definitely holds some, I don't know what the right word is, but Trump's from a generation of yesterday's generation. He's an older guy, so I certainly believe he would hold views that the younger generation would probably call sexist. Absolutely do not believe Trump is a homophobe in any capacity. Absolutely not a xenophobe. Xenophobia means you're scared of like outside things and cultures. And no, come on, get out of here. Guy travels around the world his whole life. Religious bigot. No, actually, if I were going to bet, I would bet Donald Trump's actually probably agnostic or atheist. And the only reason anybody ever claims to be religious when it comes to politics is because they have to be, because most people are. But I think Trump is a New York liberal, okay? He was a Democrat for a long time, but because the Democrats kind of went nuts, he's more of a moderate Republican in most of his views, albeit he does have some views that kind of branch out into the, ultra-conservative touches. But for the most part, he's more to the center than most of the politicians we've seen in a long time. And he says we have to confront that truth, and reject Trump's bigotry. Yet, Bernie, this is literally you being a bigot. Like, you know what? I really hate the phrase, like when people say you're being closed-minded. I'm like, listen, if you think I'm being closed-minded because you don't agree with my opinion and I don't agree with yours, then we're both being closed-minded. It's really dumb. But bigotry is also something else that's really annoying, because bigotry means you're intolerant of other people's opinions. Well, Bernie, if you're going to attack the president based on what he believes, you're actually displaying the bigotry. But not just Azealia Banks. Bernie has been called out for a while. So you go to Google and you do a search, and there's a bunch of people calling out Bernie. Here's one where they said, he called Hillary corrupt and incompetent, calls women minority issues identity politics, but women's rights. Sure. And then there's another one that said, the majority were fighting for women's rights last year while you were working to destroy our chances by vilifying our greatest hero, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Yes, people don't like Bernie. And this is one of my favorites. Get that finger out of your face, you fake ally, in response to Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is not left enough. Bernie Sanders is a career politician. He's an establishment politician. And I'll tell you what, this is one of the reasons why, for all the negative things, I like Bernie Sanders. Because he does call out identity politics. And I started playing that game, and I'm not too happy with that. He's really been pulled into the mud by these people. And you know what, Bernie? If that's the game you're going to play, then you lost to me. Right? He doesn't have the strength to stand up and call out this nonsense. But you can see how much they hate him. They protest themselves. They eat their own. No greater ally in Bernie Sanders. To be honest, look at the Democratic Party. Look at the establishment elites, the millionaires. And then you have Bernie Sanders, who makes a couple $100,000 a year, his 174,000. People always talk about how he owns multiple homes. Like, oh, come on, dude. The dude's nearly 80. I'm sure he's saved up for a long time and he's got a retirement account, and he can afford to get multiple homes. It's not a big deal. Old people in retirement sometimes have more than one home. But I get the criticism that he's a social democrat, whatever. The point is, out of all the Democrats, out of all establishment politicians, Bernie Sanders is the most likely to agree with these people. 100%. And what do? They call him out. And so one of the things, this is really great, this is from Splinter. They say, not good enough Bernie Sanders. This has been going on for a long time. Everyone thinks that Bernie Sanders was the leader of this progressive wave, but they hate him. They hate Bernie. They do. This article is from June, and they're mad at Bernie Sanders because he refused to call for abolishing ICE. And let's not forget, all of the newly elected progressive Democrats who, when asked, now will you abolish ICE, they went, oh, well, we'll talk about it. All the people who campaigned on abolishing ICE, terminating ICE, said, well, we want to focus on things that are more important, right? So you march around telling all the people you're going to abolish ICE, and then you latch onto this rhetoric, they vote for you, and then you walk it back. Sounds very political to me. And this is why I just hate politicians. Because, if you're going to campaign on something, and then once you're elected, just walk it back, you never believed it in the first place. You were lying to people to get their votes. But this is why I like Bernie. He refused to say it. So let's see what the story says. They say, on Sunday, CNN's Jake Tapper asked Senator Bernie Sanders a simple and reasonable question. Does he favor abolishing the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency? And here's what he said. I think that what we need is to create policies which deal with immigration in a rational way. And a rational way is not locking children up in detention centers or separating them from their mothers. What we need is Trump to sit down with members of Congress and work on a rational program which deals with this serious issue. Respectfully, Senator, what the F kind of nonsense answer is this? What? It's a perfectly reasonable answer. Saying the president should sit down with Congress to solve the problem and not separate children? Look, you got people on the right saying that the children separation is simply because people who enter the country illegally go to jail and children don't go to jail with their parents. And people on the left are saying abolish ICE. And Bernie comes in from the left with a reasonable response. Okay, well, we shouldn't separate children, but let's sit down with the president and come up with the answer. What do? They rag on him. Bernie, you're never going to be good enough. This is how you're going to play this one right now, Bernie. We're at a moment when the cruelty and inhumanity of the entire immigration system, let alone ICE, is on trial, and growing numbers of politicians are hopping on the abolish ICE bandwagon. And then they walked it back. God, this article did not age well. You sit there yelling at Bernie for refusing to say it, and then all your pretty little progressives who get elected walk back their claims saying, we want to focus on healthcare and we'll talk about ICE. One even said, well, I never said abolish ICE. I said terminate ICE, which is something different, apparently. And I think it was a woman who said that, so I'm doing this deep pirate voice. I have no idea why. But it's just, this is what I love about people when it comes to politics. Bernie, how dare you be consistent in your opinion and not try and lie to gain votes? And then all the progressives who are in the caucus who are like, we want to abolish ICE, now are elected going, oh, we don't really want to abolish ICE. We like the powers we get from the federal government and don't want to limit the enforcement that we can use. Well, I don't know why they don't want to abolish ICE anymore, but I thought it was hilarious. I actually made a video about this, and this article is ragging on Bernie. Didn't age well. Not at all. Merely calling for ICE, an organization, lest we forget, that is just 15 years old, to be abolished should be the moderate default position for any self-respecting progressive. Oh, God. This just, Doesn't age well. I wonder what this person has to say now about the progressives walking back their claims they want to abolish ICE. When he sits there grandstanding saying Bernie isn't good enough, how dare he not use rhetoric that no one actually believed in the first place? See, on the debate stage, asked about gun control, Bernie said it is an urban versus rural issue. And I said, Bernie, you're 100% right. It is. It makes a lot of sense to own firearms when you live in the middle of nowhere. I lived in the middle of nowhere. Okay, I had a air compression pellet rifle, not a real gun, right? I mean, it is a real gun. It's not like a actual powerful weapon. Theoretically, could be lethal, but not really. It hurt somebody. I lived about 40 miles away from the city, and about 40 minutes away from any police. So when someone broke in my yard, I'm like, wow, what do I do? When animals kept breaking into my yard, I'm like, wow, what do I do? They killed my chickens. What am I supposed to do? I got a pellet gun, mostly to scare the animals. I never shot at anything. But the idea was I can't let my animals die, and I can't do nothing when someone literally broke into my yard. It was a big property. They were snooping around the back property. I don't know what they were doing. It was a rental. And that's when you realize that in a rural environment, it does make sense to have self-protection. In a city, I can understand why it doesn't, for a lot of reasons. But Bernie was right, and Bernie, although he's far left for the Democrats, he's not far left like these activists who hate his guts. Anyway, Bernie, I'm a big fan, but I think he's just played it too. He's played into the mud too much. He's been pulled down, and that makes me sad. I also don't think he has the strength to lead because he gets walked all over all the time. But I'm glad he's willing to not say stupid things like abolish ICE, and he's willing to be honest. But I think he could do better. So I'll say this, Bernie, you're not far enough left for these people, and you've moved too much into their weird game to be good enough for me. And thus trying to capture what the old saying. He who tries to capture two rabbits will capture neither, right? Something like that. Focus on one thing. Focus on the core demo, and otherwise you just lose out. Anyway, stick around. I got one more video coming up in just a few minutes.